At midnight, she was already there, standing in the middle of the road as if the darkness itself had folded around her like a cloak. I know the exact hour because the headlights of my truck cut through the fog right then. Two blunt, accusing eyes that lit the silhouette for a fraction of a second and then threw everything back into shadow. That flash is the memory that keeps coming. The shape of a dress, the long hair hanging loose, and something limp in her hand like a wilted bouquet or a handful of weeds. It looked wrong in the way only a single inexplicable detail can be wrong. I tell you this as a confession because I was the one who slowed down. I could have driven past. I could have kept my hands steady on the wheel and pretended the figure was a trick of light. Instead, I killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt obscene, too loud, like a held breath stretched thin until it tore. The damp air settled in the cab and smelled faintly of cut grass and something older, metallic, like blood on pennies. My skin prickled, the hair along my forearms stood up. For the first time in a long time, I noticed how the world had its own small sounds at night. A stray dog's distant bark, the whisper of wind through telephone wires, the steady, soft tick of cooling metal. They sounded ordinary until they didn't. I wrapped my jacket tighter, told myself it was curiosity and not courage that pulled me out of the truck. The gravel under my boots crunched with a sound that seemed too loud in the emptiness. Her back was to me. She didn't turn. She didn't look back when I reached the edge of the road. She simply kept standing, an unmoving cutout against the fog and the halo of my taillights. The thing in her hand, stems, roots, something dark and drooping, swayed once, like a metronome marking a tempo only she could hear. There was a childlike quality to the way she stood, feet bare, dress falling to her calves, but the air around her felt old and patient, thick with histories I couldn't name. When I finally spoke, my voice felt like an intruder. "Are you okay?" I asked. The words left me small and unnecessary. She answered by tilting her head, not to look at me but to listen, and in that tilt, the street seemed to lean with her. Behind us, the world was an ocean of black. Ahead, the road led somewhere I had never driven. I wanted to take her hand, to steady whatever tremor she held. Instead, my fingers closed around nothing but cold air, and something low and patient moved somewhere between the trees, a sound I realized was not wind. I remember the instant my throat closed around a sound that wasn't quite a sob. I reached out, the heel of my hand hovering over the drooping stems, and everything went thin, like the world had been turned down to a whisper. When my fingers brushed the bundle, it wasn't plant matter. It was slick and cool, and gave under my touch with the sickly elasticity of something that had been cut. I snatched my hand back as if burned. A smear of dark fluid feathered onto my glove and smelled like old pennies again, but sharper, ash and iron and something I wanted no name for. She didn't flinch. She never moved. Instead, she took 3 slow steps forward as if closing a small distance meant nothing at all. With every step, the fog seemed to press around her and pull at me, narrowing the space until my chest hurt. My phone was in my pocket. The screen lit when I checked it. No bars. The time had stopped at 12:01. I tried calling out for help, for anyone, but the road swallowed my voice. The distant dog was gone. The telephone wires hummed a single, flat note and then were silent. "Who are you?" I demanded, because names are proof that someone is whole. She tilted her head again, and this time a sound left her, low and breathless, like an animal's cough at the edge of a field. It was not a language I knew, but my name hung in the dark after it. Not spoken, really, remembered. I felt my history unspool, and with each thread that broke, I could see the shape of things that shouldn't fit together. A girl's missing persons poster I'd seen last summer at a gas station. The dress in the photograph, the same faded cotton, the bouquet of weeds drawn crudely across its margin. I had driven past that same poster for months and never looked twice. Now I was looking at the woman who might have been on it, or might have worn it, or might have worn it the way a story wears a costume. Then the headlights in the distance blinked, not the steady beam of some passing car, but a slow, deliberate flashing that drilled into the fog like a metronome. My truck's engine refused when I tried to start it. The key turned and spun fruitlessly. The radio was a dead, shallow buzz. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind her, more silhouettes unrolling from the black like smoke unspooling from a match. I lifted my head to gauge the road. There were no houses, no other lights, like the world outside. That stretch of asphalt had been erased. She stepped closer until I could smell the damp of her hair, the faint rot of something buried. Her face was still a shadow, a hollow where light bent around rather than into. "You found me," she said without opening her mouth. The words scraped under my skin because they were not accusatory, only matter-of-fact, as if she had been waiting for this for a very long time. A sudden pressure tightened my chest. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my keys. In the glass of my windshield, reflected over the hood, I caught a movement that made my stomach hollow. Another figure standing behind me, impossibly close, head cocked in the same patient tilt. I turned, fast, stupid human, and there was nothing but the road and the fog and the slow, inevitable dimming of my taillights, as if something small and inexorable had begun to pull the light away. She smiled then, and it wasn't a curve of lips so much as the folding of shadow into a human shape. The moment she stepped into the light, I understood how small my choices had been. Tiny, polite rebellions against whatever had brought her there. Time narrowed to a ring of cold air around us. Her breath came in slow, damp little gusts that smelled like cellar soil and old rain. My hands found the steering wheel and clung to it because doing nothing was still an action. It anchored me to a life that felt suddenly remote. Behind the glass, the road was an abyss that kept swallowing markers. The dashed centerline, a distant reflector, a crooked milepost. The world outside my windshield looked like a photograph left too long in sunlight, faded at the edges until only the center remained. She reached the truck and rested her palm against the metal. The contact made the skin on my arms crawl, like static passing through bone. The truck did not lock. The doors sagged on hinges of attention. The keys were still in my hand. For a ridiculous second, I thought I could restart the engine and escape, but the thought dissolved under the weight of her gaze. If it was a gaze, there were no eyes to meet. Instead, there was the feeling of being cataloged, items checked off in a ledger I had never read. I tried to laugh, a tight, dry sound that my throat swallowed. The laugh stayed in my mouth like a coin. "Who are you?" I asked again, though I didn't want an answer. I wanted absolution, a name to place over the spinning of the night. She tilted her head, and a memory unspooled in me like a film eaten by moths. A house on the edge of town with a porch light that never turned off, a door that slammed for no reason in the rain, a girl who would not come inside. The memory wasn't mine alone. It slid between my ribs and nested there like an accusation. Then she spoke, and the sound was small and intimate, as if reading from the margin of some private book. "You remember me," she said. "You remember what you drove past." The truth settled then, not as revelation, but as a slow, inevitable fact. I had been driving through a story for months, cataloging small tragedies like mileage markers. People vanish, posters go up, and the rest of us continue the route. Her voice wrapped around my name and threaded it into sentences that made me younger and more ashamed. I tried to apologize, to offer something, my keys, my jacket, the meager light from my phone, but apologies float away in fog. They have no weight. She tilted her head one last time and placed her hand on the hood. The metal there was warm under her skin, as if heat had been stored and was now being released back into the night. The thing in her other hand, once a bundle of stems, now hung limp and dark. I couldn't tell if it moved or if the air around it breathed. A faraway door closed with a sound like a small bell, and when I looked up, the road was clear. No silhouettes, no slow blinking lights, nothing but the soft, indifferent drift of fog. I started the engine. It turned with a healthy, ordinary clatter and then smoothed into motion. I drove forward because the road is a muscle. When you flex it, you keep moving. But with every mile, the memory of standing there pressed on the back of my eyes until it felt like someone else was sitting in the passenger seat, smiling without making noise. When I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, her figure had melted into the dark as if she'd never been solid at all, except for a small wet streak across the road that the headlights picked out and then failed to hold. I still see that streak in the sheen of every puddle. She is patient.
subscribe to Horror Story Bar.